Greetings. Back with another one. Today I want to talk little bit about the Tao Te Ching, and you know, many years of studying and practicing, like martial science, martial arts, whatever you want to call it. I mostly have a background on in the Chinese side. I only got into like mainly like the Japanese side, the hard side, probably less than 10 years back. But many years of just watching old kung fu films and stuff like that, and really taking in Chinese culture and all that stuff. I understand that a lot of throughout the dynasties of China, the Han Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty, the Qing Dynasty, and all that stuff. From a philosophical standpoint, a lot of those martial arts styles and systems that you see coming out of China, a lot of those those disciplines, they incorporate a lot of Taoism or Taoism into them. And I have yet to get a copy of the Tao Te Ching. I will someday, but years after just learning about the Shaolin and how far back the Zhongguo Wushu stuff goes back. It was just always so interesting to me to learn about that stuff, and I mean it's still very vast. It's still a lot I don't know, but from a Western standpoint, of course, Bruce Lee was like one of the first who kind of like brought that to a Western consciousness, and I was never really a philosophical guy until I started really listening to him and watching him and stuff like that, and now I read up on guys like Alan Watts and stuff like that, and but Lao Tzu was always kind of an enigma for me. You always hear the name. I mean, to this day, I don't even know if that's really his name or because Lao Tzu, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe for any native Chinese speakers, Lao Tzu, I believe it means old teacher. I believe Lao means old, and Tzu means teach to instruct, I believe. So I don't even know if that was his name. That was probably just some title that many followers gave him. And it's been also said that the Tao Te Ching, I don't believe a lot of Chinese historians or philosophers don't believe that all this stuff was probably just written by one person. It was probably written by a collection of philosophers over time, and you get that with a lot of biblical teachings as well. It's not really just one person doing it. It's a collection of people over time. They gather texts. They pretty much carried these thoughts and these philosophies, and they you know congregated into like texts that we study for millennia. But I just wanted to go over some, but I'm not going to really touch on Taoism in terms of Taoism is like, as you see over here, the theme item is in Taoism and like the history. I just want to go over a few quotes and see if I because the purpose of this video, I just want to read some Taoist quotes, and I want to see if I that's the thing about philosophy. It's kind of like what you see in it. So I mean, for a long time I used to love just hearing all of these philosophical quotes and try to interpret them as how in my own way and how I saw them. So I just want to look at some of these these quotes and see if I can kind of like share what they mean to me or how I see them. And as you can see, it's different categories. You have Tao, the way quotes, nature and world quotes, knowledge and wisdom quotes, opposites and paradoxes, non-action and action, prevention and patience, moderation and modesty, humility and compassion, desire, wealth and greed, good and bad, role models, simplicity, stillness, silence, fear and perfections, the female, child and family, yielding quotes, rulers and government, longevity and death, seeing clearly, war and violence. Now I might have to separate this in two parts because there's no way I'm probably going to cover all these today or in this video. And I just want to just pick apart because I don't know. It's like I said, it's always been kind of fun to me, And like I said, Bruce Lee was the one who really got me into it. Just coming up with all these quotes and stuff like that. And when you and I actually have a copy of his book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And what you really got in that book was mainly just quotes, and a lot of it in you know probably weren't quotes that he came up with, but he would you know break them down, historical quotes, and then he would kind of like simplify them to make them more understandable to people who may not be too familiar how the ancient Chinese philosophers conveyed their word to their followers and stuff like that. So Bruce Lee made it a little bit more simplified and more mainstream. So that book really consists of just a lot of quotes and stuff like that, and he incorporated within his own approach to Jeet Kune Do and stuff like that. It's very fascinating. I mean, like I said, it doesn't matter who it is and where it comes from, and anything that kind of like gets me to think and see things in various ways. It's always been it's a for me it's a good way to exercise my brain and stuff like that. So I just want to go over some quotes. I guess I would choose nature and world for now, and just to go over some, and just to see if I can dissect them and see and kind of like put my own 31 cents in on how I see them. And the first one it says heaven and earth are not kind. They regard all things as offerings. Now, what do I see in that? It's a combination of the spiritual and kind of worldly. I've always kind of lead to more of the worldly side and stuff like that. But what I get from that is just that like I like to believe that this world that we live in is kind of like a combination of the two, because good things happen here and bad things happen here. So what I get from that is it says are not kind. The world they regard all things as offerings. So it's like a give and take. You get in this world what you put into it, I guess, and in a way, nothing's going to be handed to you. In per se, you have to earn for what you have to earn and work for what you want. That's kind of what I take away from it. The obstacles and the famous quote. Excuse me. The famous thing that we all like to say: life isn't fair. So I mean, that's kind of what how I take away from it. But man, it really just gets you thinking, man. It could be a multitude of different things. But next one, it says, "Is not the space between heaven and earth like a bellows? It is empty but lacks nothing. The more it moves, the more comes out of it." Kind of like revolving, I mean, regardless of you're standing still, life continue to move. The world continues to go on with or without you. This is not a space between. Is it not a space between heaven and earth like bellows? It is empty but lacks nothing. It's kind of the more it moves, the more it comes out of it. I think that has a lot to do with just humanity itself. The more we put into, these things that we call lives, the more we put into it, the more we get out of it. And because there's so many of us on this planet, the more productive we are as the human race, the more better I guess we can make the world as a whole. I mean, and I don't know. It seems like you get what you put in. The more you put into it, the more the bigger the reward would be. It seems. The more it moves, the more it comes out of it. That's what I get out of it. Hard work does pay off. You get what you put into it. The more you put in, the bigger the reward would be. That's what I take away from it. Like I said, no right or wrong here. Feel free to chime in all you want. It's the next one. All things flourish, and each returns to its source. I like to. Sorry if you could hear my fan going off in the background. See if I can turn it down real quick. But like I said, summer's officially over, so now I took my AC unit out the window. Now I just got like a little fan going. So apologize if you can hear it. It says all things arise. Wait. Oh yeah. All things. Am I right? Yeah. No, no, I'm with this one. I skipped that one. It said all things flourish, and each returns to its source. All things flourish, and each returns to its source. What I take away from that is just the circle of life itself. You know, anything that's born will flourish as their life goes on and returns to its source. See, that reminds me of what Alan Watts used to say. You know how, because he would cringe when people would say you're born into the world, and he was like, no, no, you come from the world, and I can understand what he means by that, because we're all, like I said, because we're all living on this planet, and we all exist in life as we see it. So we know we all come from it. So life creating life, and life can create itself and stuff like that. So it boggles the mind, but I kind of you know interpret that as the circle of life. What is born is going to flourish, and then when it's no longer there, it returns back to the soil, which is it kind of like the ashes, dust to dust. You're born from the world, and you return back into it, just in a different form or something like that. That's what I kind of take away from it, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. This one, it says strong winds do not last all morning. Hard rains do not last all day. What I take away from that, you know, you're not gonna be at rock bottom forever. A bad day doesn't last. Hard times don't last. It's a process. It passes. If you're having a bad time, you're not always gonna just be wallowing in that misery all the time. There's gonna be some good times, as long as you have the determination to keep pushing. There will be good times. That's what I take away from it. Strong winds do not last all morning. It's basically saying any negative feelings, that negative thoughts that you have, they do pass. You're not going to always wallow in misery, and you're not always going to be sad and miserable all the time. There's going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. There's plenty of things around you that you can be positive about. And hard rains do not last. So that's how I see it. In order to make it to the sunshine, sometimes you got to trek through the rain. That's what I see. That's what I take away from it. The bad times don't always last. They pass, and you will be around for the good things as long as you keep pushing. It says, if heaven and earth are unable to persist, how could man? If heaven and earth are unable to persist, how could man? I reference that to nature itself. We all exist within nature, and it's nothing that we can really. I mean, as long as I would say, as long as this planetary body exists, we will as well. We don't know how long we have it, but as long as life exists as we know it, there is always going to be some persistence. There's always going to be some pushback. Nature. I mean, as human beings, you have nature in terms of the elements, but our bodies are elemental as well. If you really think about it. No, we don't have. No, but like I said, we do have water in our bodies. We may not have fire. We may not have, plants or whatever, but there are some natural elements that consist within us. Our bodies are, contain a lot of carbon, a lot of water, H2O and stuff like that, CO2 and stuff like that. It's if heaven and earth are unable to persist, how could man? It's just basically saying, the planetary body and the people who live on it, we're kind of in this fight together. As long as our planet remains, we could remain with it as well. It's kind of like a tag. It's kind of like a tag team thing. We got to take care of our planet and stuff like that. But if we don't take care of it, or we abuse it, we won't survive. And that's how I see it. You take care of take care of the planet, and it'll take care of you. That's how I see it. It's kind of like a partnership. Let's see another one. Let's go with this one. All things carry yin and embrace yang. They reach harmony by blending with the vital breath. Well, you see the words yin and yang. That's referring to the taijutsu, better known as to the Westerners as yin yang, the taijutsu. Basically, there's a light and darkness within in us all. Where there's life, there will be death for us all. There's a positive and a negative aspect, and one can't exist without the other. And if only one exists, we wouldn't be able to identify the other one because the only one exists. So, I mean, yes, we strive to be good, but we do need evil, if that makes any sense. Because how will we know what good is if we don't have bad? So it's just they're inseparable. One can't exist without the other. That's the hallmark of what I take away from it. That's the philosophy of the balance between the within the taijutsu, the yin and yang. Life, death, dark, light. You know, that's the negative, positive. That's what I take away from it. The blending of the of the taijutsu. Let me go back. So that was nature and world. Let me go to knowledge and wisdom. See what this is about. Knowledge and wisdom. It says malicious knowledge. All right, let's see what this is about. When wisdom and knowledge appear, great pretense arises. Okay. What I take away from this, when knowledge and wisdom appear, thinking before you act. That's what I take away from this one. And I'm very much familiar with that approach. I would say one of my I would say a big character flaw within me, and I'll be a little bit personal with this. I think too much. I think I think too much sometimes. In fact, I think too much all the time. I pride myself on absorbing as much knowledge as I can and being able to absorb as much wisdom as I can. When I was growing up, I took very much more to the older generation. I mean, yeah, I hung out with all my friends and my cousins and stuff like that who were my age. But I really held dear to what my parents were telling me. My aunts and uncles, my grandparents, everybody. It really stuck with me, and I guess you could say that was a very Confucius approach to really absorb what the older generation, people who've already been down there road you're traveling. I mean, I really do believe that thinking before you act is crucial. I mean, I understand there are sometimes, like just like Bruce said, you don't think, feel. I mean, there's a time and place for feeling, but I believe that thinking before you act is a really safe way to go. I mean, I understand sometimes that you just have to act, but that's what I take away from this quote right here. When knowledge and wisdom appear, great pretense. Because I believe that I believe that prevention is better than cure. So when you are aware of, when you are aware of, when you're conscious enough that there will be a cause for whatever action you take, you will make a decision that is not as that won't be hazardous to you that much. A lot of times, we don't want to think before we act, and we do a lot. And sometimes, we end up with the short end of the stick. So what I take away from this is just, whatever knowledge and whatever wisdom that you absorb within this journey, once it becomes second nature to you to apply that, you'll make less mistakes and not be so willing to just jump into things without that pretense of thinking before you act. I mean, that's what I take away from it, just thinking before you act. I really like that one though. The next one, it says, those who understand others are clever. Those who understand themselves are wise. All right, now this is, see, I'm liking this category already. Wisdom and knowledge. Those who understand others are clever, and this speaks to me very dearly as well, because I'm very much a loner and I'm very introverted, so I'm always in my brain all the time. So I kind of wish that like I said, whichever way that we're wired, we always kind of wish that we had a little bit of the other as well. Introverts, we kind of wish that we had kind of like those social skills that the extroverts do, and I've met some extroverts, and then they look at me and they was like, wow, man, like they're just blown away at how quiet and how reserved and demure that I like, for like the guys that I work with and stuff like that. They see that I'm very to myself and I'm very quiet and stuff like that. So I mean, people who are extroverted, they do revere a lot of, they really do admire how us introverts kind of carry ourselves, and we're never, like I said, I don't really raise my voice anymore. Those days for me are gone. I've you know I mean, my goal ultimate goal is just to be stress free, or keep the stress levels low, because at the end of the day, man, health is everything. I mean, we're not getting any younger. So when it says that those who understand others are clever, what I take away from that, those who understand others are clever, listen more than you speak. Somebody once asked me, if you had a message to send people, or if you had something that you wanted to say to the public, I'd rather listen, to be honest with you. I mean, that speaks more to my personality anyway. I like to, just like I said, I'm quiet anyway. That's just my nature. That's just how I'm wired. So I'm always listening to people and how they carry themselves and what they say and how they say it. And a dear friend of mine, always I used to tell him all the time, man, I know you better than you know yourself and stuff like that, kind of in an arrogant way. But that's just me, kind of like just blowing, giving him a hard time. But what I meant by that is just that, while you're over here, being all loud and being all extravagant, I'm just back there just watching you, just taking it all in. So understanding others, I think that is a very important thing, and I believe it is really clever, because you get to understand how people think and what their tendencies are. And throughout my life, a lot of people that I've known, I would always say, man, what are you coming to me for? I ought to come to you. You the one that got more experience, stuff like that. But they would say to me, like I said, Bleak, the reason why I come to you is because like I said, because I've always been an outsider. So it's been said, when you're on the outside, you see things clearly. But when you're in the middle of everything, things appear to be a little bit opaque sometimes, and you really can't see things because you're in the eye of the storm, so to speak. But yeah, but they would always say they come to me because they understand that my viewpoint would be a little bit different, and it would get them thinking. So yeah, really paying attention to people and listening to how they talk and what they talk about and how they carry themselves. That, I think that really does make you clever, because once they come to you, you'll have something to say that will make them maybe use a part of their brain and they probably don't even know that they had. I mean, I got that so many times throughout my life, man. Like, man, like, I mean, nobody's ever said that to me before. I mean, you really got me thinking what you just said, man. I've never seen anybody put it the way, like, I heard that so many times, and I guess it's because I just rather listen to people. So that's what I take from it. And also, those who understand themselves are wise. Well, being an introvert, that's an advantage, because you're always in your own mind all the time. Not to say anything healthy or not to say anything unhealthy, but understanding yourself. Me personally, I think that's the ultimate goal. But besides, personal health and making sure your body's straight and stuff like that, so you can live as healthy as you can for as long as you can. It reminds me of a philosophical quote that Bruce Lee had put in the Enter the Dragon. I don't know if you, for those who've seen that film, in the beginning when he's talking to the senior monk there, and he asked him, "What are your thoughts when facing an opponent?" And Bruce said, "There is no opponent because the word I doesn't exist." Now, for me, I think the ultimate opponent is yourself. The ultimate opponent is yourself. That's the way I see it because nobody else can use this other than you, regardless of what is being thrown at your way, regardless of how people take to you, no matter what they're saying to you. You are the one who can control the outcome, at least as far as your thinking is concerned. I say all the time, man, people can say whatever they want to say about me, man. It's not gonna rattle me. I heard enough. Now, put your hands on me. That's one other thing. I got to do what I got to do. But it just goes back to sticks and stones, break my bones and all that stuff. So, understanding yourself, it is the ultimate test. When just like martial arts, you study martial arts, and your instructors, your teachers, your masters, they hope that what they say to you sticks, and they hope that this gift that they've bestowed upon you stays with you to the point where you don't have to use it. You don't have to use it for any type of personal gain. You don't have to use it to show off. You don't have to use it to demonstrate any type of bravado. You only unsheath it when you have no other options, when you are forced to. So that's why I always say, man, when you are bestowed with such a gift, such as knowledge and wisdom, it is important that you bestow it on others in a very careful manner, in a way that's not cocky, in a way that's not arrogant to the point where you're talking down to people you don't. That was one thing I've always struggled at, because being in my own mind all the time, there were times where I was talking at people. you know, um, it's kind of like how, I don't know if you've seen that show Sheldon, The Big Bang Theory. I took so much to Sheldon's character. I seen a lot of myself in Sheldon. Obviously Sheldon is a brainiac, a genius, right? Math was and all that stuff. But I'm just talking about like how his personality was. He was so proud of the knowledge that he possessed. He tended to talk at people, but he didn't really know that he was kind of coming off and rubbing people in a negative manner. Like I had a tendency of doing that throughout my life, talking at people, even though there was never really my intention to hurt. But it's a way that you can bestow knowledge and wisdom on people in a way that gets them thinking to the point where they don't feel like they're being preached to. I don't want to preach to people. So understanding yourself is the most important thing. And that in ties with not just your psychological, but also, just your bodily health overall. Knowing your body, knowing what medicine to put into it, knowing what foods to eat, knowing what not to eat, and understanding things in moderation, knowing what your body needs to keep yourself nourished and fueled and stuff like that. That ties into with all of that stuff. Understanding yourself. So that is the chief aim, or at least for me, understanding myself. I think I understand myself a little bit too much because, like I said, when you're introverted and a loner like me, you're always in your own head, and but it also gives you a chance to examine yourself and knowing your faults. No one's perfect. I have a lot of faults and I know what I need to work on. I'm not gonna delve into them right now, but you do a lot of self-diagnosing. I've done it so much lately, just diagnosing myself and knowing what needs must in a way. So yeah, that's what I take away from it, man. Knowing others is clever. Listening more and talking less, and understanding yourself. Knowing who you are and how you process things from a psychological standpoint, and also a bodily standpoint. Even though it's all connected to me, but yeah. Next one. People are difficult to rule because of their knowledge. Well, people are difficult to rule because of their knowledge. Well, what I take from that ultimately, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if I was just a weak body old man, and you can beat me down and rip my arms off, rip my legs off, and just leave me there in a bloody pulp. But as long as my psychology is intact, you can never really conquer me. You know, I mean that's how I see it. People are difficult to rule because of their knowledge. And yes, throughout history, the greatest conquerors, I guess, the people who ruled, they were not really the smartest people. They were not really the most knowledgeable people. But they understand in order to rule, you had to rule with the iron fist a lot of times, especially during these times. Excuse me, when these philosophies were being etched out. So what I take from this is that people are difficult to rule because of their knowledge. I mean, if you go back to the time where you had countries that fell into kind of like communist, like China. I mean, let's I mean we're in China. Let's use China for example. The communist regime, when they took over, who did they attack first? The intellectuals. Once the communists took over, they went at the intellectuals because they knew the intellectuals had a power to sway the masses. Like they always say, knowledge is power. It truly is. A powerful mind is never really appreciated in terms of mainstream because the illusion is that we believe that the most powerful person is the person with the most money. Because of the after industrialization in the world that we live in, we're led to believe that. And I'm not saying that the person who has a lot of money doesn't have a lot of power, but it goes back to that old saying: a fool who has gold will soon part it. I say that again: a fool who has gold will soon part it. You have a person who possesses a lot of these resources, but they don't have a strong muscle between their ears, and they end up losing it all. So regardless of what people try to do to you from a bodily perspective, as long as as long as they don't conquer you from a psychological standpoint, you can never really rule me. That's what I take away from it, because we've seen this throughout history. It's always the intellectuals, always the smartest people, like the really really strong minds who get got first. That's how I've always seen it. It's kind of like how the bullies in school. Who the bullies always tease and who do they always pick on? The eggheads, the intellectuals. So that's how I've always. That's why I take away from this. People who are people are difficult to rule because of their knowledge. The strongest of the minds are harder to conquer because they understand what's going on. It's seems a little red pill a little bit. But I like that one. That's a beautiful one. I like that. What we got next? It says, know what you don't know. Not knowing of the internal leads to unfortunate errors. Not knowing of the internal leads to unfortunate errors. There's an old African proverb that goes, not to know is not to know is bad. Not to wish to know is worse. So what I take from this is, obviously none of us can predict the future, but it's always good to know where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, then and when I say and keep in mind, like this, I'm trying to look at it from a perspective thousands of years ago, not really modern time. So I think what was in the mind of Lao Tzu or all of the philosophers who put their own stamp on these writings, not knowing of the eternal leads of unfortunate errors. I guess this seems a bit spiritual for me, when you talk about eternal, like this probably refers to like the afterlife. If you believe in the afterlife and stuff like that, that's kind of what I take from it. I said not knowing of the eternal leads to unfortunate errors. So basically, what I take away from it, like if you believe in the afterlife, there's something beyond this one. That's kind of what I take away from it. But from a philosophical standpoint, not knowing of the eternal leads to that's what I'm saying. The internal is it's kind of like a goal that if you believe in the afterlife, if you believe in eternity, it's like a goal that like a lot of people want to reach. For me, it's hard to dissect that because what is eternal? Because our lives certainly aren't. So like I said, I mean, I think that solely will. I don't know. That kind of solely depends on if you believe in afterlife or something like that. That's kind of what I take away from it. Not knowing of the eternal leads to unfortunate errors and stuff like that. That's kind of what I take away from it. It's kind of like it's a little spiritual. Kind of refers to like life beyond as what we know it. That's kind of what I take away from it. It's interesting, but that's a deep one right there. It says those who know it do not speak about it. Those who speak about it do not know it. Well, those who know it do not speak it about it. Those who speak about it do not know it. Well, that's very that's very commonplace today. That's very commonplace. I could bring up one conflict I really don't want to, because there's so much propaganda that's out there, and there's a lot of people who speak the loudest, and they have no clue what they're talking about. So that's kind of what I take away from it. I mean, it's like when you're in a room, you tend to discover that the person who's the loudest is the most foolish or the most ignorant. That's kind of that's a pattern that I've frequent throughout my life. Like I said, I'm always listening to other people. I'm always listening. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. They could be talking about peanut butter. They could be talking about baseball card. It doesn't matter. How people frame their speech through their own lens, and how they do it is really important, regardless of what people are talking about. It's very, very important. At least for me, it is. When I'm at work and I hear some of my coworkers talking about stuff and how they talk about it, and the way they talk about it, it's very important. It's very important. So, and this is not to call anybody at work. I'm just using it as an example. Like, you just walking around. I mean, we all see it. You're just walking around minding your own business, and you always hear people who would just speak very loudly about something. And then you kind of like dig into what they're talking about, then you do your own research, and you're like, man, that fool don't even know what he was talking about. So like, I tend to that's what I take away from it, is that those who know it do not speak it. It's just when you are knowledgeable and when you start to grow into intellectually, you don't have to enter the realm of pettiness, letting everybody know that you possess this knowledge. So you don't really have to speak on it. Once people realize how knowledgeable you are, and once people see how insightful you are, they'll come to you. And I've noticed that a lot in my life as well. The people who talk the most, the people who talk the loudest, they tend to seek advice or some sort of a lifeline to the people who speak less. That's what I take away from it. Like in reverse it back, because people always used to say, man, you go into like a club or a public setting, the loudest person is there. He's usually the biggest wimp in there. It's the quiet ones you got to watch out for. The brothers that's posting on the wall, don't mess with them. That's what I take away from it. Just The biggest loudmouths, the biggest talkers, you soon discover that they don't know much. And it's the ones who, speak softly but carry a big stick, if you will. But yeah, I like that one. Yeah, the less you speak, the more the more knowledgeable you'll become, and the more you speak, the more you need to up your intellectual prowess in a way. That's what I take away from it. Like I said, feel free to chime in all you want, man. I welcome all comments about this one because this is deep stuff right here. I love this stuff. This is the type of stuff that I'm on all the time. Maybe not from a philosophical standpoint, but just always questioning myself and questioning others. Asking myself rhetorical questions all the time. It's something that I like to call quisdom. Quisdom instead of wisdom, it's quisdom. That's what I like to call it. And my definition of quisdom is basically repeatedly asking yourself rhetorical questions to see if the answer will ever change. And if the question changes, maybe your approach to things should change. This is a little bit of a something that I've formulated over the years. Always asking yourself a rhetorical question. Ask yourself the same question 10 times, and if the answer changes on the 10th time, maybe there's a different way of looking at things. Just my 31 cents in there. But that was knowledge and wisdom. I like the knowledge and wisdom bracket there. I like that one a lot. We're coming up on 40 minutes here, so I'm gonna do one more. Let's go to non-action and action. It says non-action. All right. The sage. Wait a minute. See if you make sure you guys see it. The sage acts by doing nothing. The power of nothingness. That's very as an enigma. What I take away from this one, the pen is mightier than the sword. Now, sage, I believe that's kind of like a title that's been given to the top teachers or something like that. It's something refers to that. The sage acts by doing nothing. So when you have a teacher and he has his pupils, or if you have a prophet or his disciples, mainly what they will dive into is you can get so much things done without having to raise a single finger. I always say that the most powerful punch you can throw is no punch. And that's from a martial arts standpoint. Because the most powerful muscle you have in your body, at least in my opinion, is the one between your ears. So yeah, when you see the word nothing, well, you have to dissect what is nothing. And to me, that it refers back to Chan Buddhist philosophies. There was a monk that once said, "Nothing can't beat everything, but everything can't beat nothing either." So when I hear in Taoist terms, when I hear nothing, because like I said, it's referring to non-action. So you may not be acting, through the action of brawn, but you are acting through the branch of your intellect. So even though this person may be standing there and they're not doing anything, but this is always working. You can't turn this off. You see what I'm saying? So what I take from that is that the sage acts by doing nothing, setting an example. Because I believe sage is refers to a teacher or someone of a higher rank. That's what I take away from the sage acts by doing nothing. So it's leading by example, that an instructor would teach his pupils or a prophet would teach his disciples, that as long as you have, a strong muscle between your ears, there's always going to be an action taking place, even if what's being presented to you looks like no action. That's what I take away from it. That's cool, man. That's cool. What else we got? Can you comprehend everything in the four directions and still do nothing? Hmm. Can you comprehend everything in the four directions and still do nothing? Well, because that raises itself as a question, I'm gonna say no. Because as long as you're alive, as long as you draw breath, you're doing something. That may be too literal, but that's my answer for it. Can you comprehend everything in four directions and still do nothing? I say no. I say no. And I'm gonna leave it right there. I'm gonna leave that one right there. What's the next one? Because he, the sage, opposes no one, no one in the world can oppose him. What I take away from this one: never allowing yourself to lean over to one side to the point where you're beyond approach, where you never put yourself in a state of mind to where you think that everything you say is right and everything is true. So because he opposes no one, no one opposes him. So it I see that as kind of like remaining neutral, or always keeping the door open to whatever thoughts you have. So we say because he opposes no one, no one in the world can oppose him. Yeah, I mostly take that as just always keeping yourself open for other thoughts, and never closing yourself off, or never leaning too much in one direction to the point where you either become, like Bruce Lee said, you either become too mechanic or you become too unscientific. So if there is no opposition, if you don't see an opposition, then there is no opposition to you. There is no opponent because the word I doesn't exist. I kind of see a little bit of that in that as well. Again, just another internal battle within oneself because he opposes no one. Yeah, what I take away from that: always remain open. You know, kind of like the best of both worlds. You're not really opposing everything, but there's really no pushback towards you either. It's that's kind of that kind of that sums up the the blending nature of the Tiger two a little bit. The best of both worlds. That's kind of how I see it. It's like a balance. Yeah, but that's how I see it. I mean, obviously, in life, there's gonna be something that you oppose. There's gonna be something, you know. So, but that's why I don't really put too much emphasis on balance that much anymore, like I used to, because at the end of the day, balance is it's a goal. It's not really a requirement. Just because I may be 90% of intellect or in 20% social, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Um, or just because I may be 90% social and only 20% intellect doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad thing. There's always, there's always kind of like that pendulum that goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Maybe you'll add a little bit more over here, you'll add a little bit over here. But just because you're not constantly in the middle all the time, I don't put too much emphasis on balance that much anymore. Because it's a goal, it's not a requirement. And again, there was a quote by Bruce Lee. I believe he got it probably from the Tao Te Ching. That really puts my mind at ease a lot. because since I'm always in my own head, I'm always thinking. I have so many dreams and so many things that I like to do, but I'm only one person, so I can't be 10 places at once, and so like that. So, but it was a quote that he said that really, really, I don't think it's enough shine or enough examination. But Bruce Lee, he said, goals, they're not always meant to be reached, but it's good to have them anyway because it pushes you in a direction when you feel like you're still fighting for something. So that speaks so much volumes to me, because normally when you think of Bruce Lee and his philosophy, mostly people refer to like the martial arts side of the house. But from a life standpoint, I mean it's beautiful, man. Like goals, they're not always meant to be reached, but it's good to have them anyway. So because as long as you draw a breath, you know, there has to be some push somewhere. There has to be some driving force that drives you somewhere. Doesn't matter how minor it is, doesn't matter how major it is. As long as you are pushing towards something, that's the indicator that you are alive, and that there is something that can be reached. And if your goal is to wake up at a specific time tomorrow and get your butt to work, hey, at least you're moving. You know what I'm saying? Slow motion better than no motion. But yeah, because y'all couldn't even see it the whole freaking time. But yeah, that's how I see it, man. Man, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's go to this one right here. The highest virtue does nothing, yet nothing needs to be done. The lowest virtue does everything, yet much remains to be done. Again, that's the Taiju principle. The yin and the yang. Is one can't exist without the other. It's yeah. I mean, that's kind of like another base quote in terms of what Taoism is all about. The existence of two things existing in one body, one feeding off the other, one giving life to the other, and vice versa, stuff like that. That's how I take it. So the highest virtue does nothing, yet nothing needs to be done. The lowest virtue does everything, yet much remains to be done. And from a martial arts side of the house, I'm gonna lean this one from a martial arts side of the house. For example, the highest virtue does nothing. When you become a master or a grandmaster at the highest level, there may be this inkling that you've done it all, and you may have this notion that there's nothing more that can be done. But that is why when you master something, it's always good to pass that down to somebody else, because it gives you a reason to keep practicing. So that to me is the overall how can I put this, the goal, if you will, the overall goal of a master or a teacher. When you master something, it's always good to pass it down, because it gives you the reason to keep moving. Because if you master something and you're alone and you have nobody to give this to, that knowledge and that wisdom kind of goes with you. So passing things down is very important, because it keeps the nature of learning, and the nature of that it continues that process of continuing growth. So that's what I see it. The highest virtue, referring to a master or a teacher, does nothing yet needs to be done. So basically, what you learned, what you mastered, it needs to be passed on to something in order for the teaching, the philosophy, the belief system, the tradition, the ritual, the practice. In order for it to remain alive, it needs to be passed to somebody else so they can absorb it as well. The lowest virtue does everything, yet much remains to be done. When you are a student, when you are a pupil, when you are a disciple, all of this knowledge and this wisdom is being passed on to you. And your ultimate test is knowing what to do with it and how to use it and how to apply it. So yeah, that so I really I so for this one I take away the relationship between a student and the teacher. That's how I take it. The teacher is masked so much and has already been down that road. But in order for the teacher to feel that to put themselves in a state of mind where they can continue to be useful, is to pass on what they learned to another. That's how I take it. The lowest virtue does everything. The student is doing everything to absorb this knowledge. Yet much remains to be done. Like I said, their journey is just beginning. So they have to go along this journey and absorb as much knowledge and wisdom as much as they can. So that's how I see it. I see it as a student and a pupil thing. The one who if you're an abbot, one of the abbot, the monks and stuff like that, and you master so much and you acquire so much knowledge and wisdom, in order for what you learn and what you master to be useful, in order for it to make any sense, in order for it to have some sort of a legitimacy, some validity, it has to be passed on to another person. That's what I take away from it. But oh man, yeah, we're going on. Yeah, we're approaching an hour with this one, man. But this was fun, man. I mean, I might have to make a part two to this because there's so much to unpack. But that was just non-action. Careful. Let me do a couple more with careful action, and then we'll be done. And then now I'll close up. It says, cautious, like crossing a river in the winter. Don't just always jump into things. Knowing your environment and knowing the risk. That's what I take away from that. Because in order to adapt with your surroundings, you have to know what the surroundings are. You have to develop a sense of awareness and always knowing that your conscious mind is always at work. So know your surroundings. I mean, not to the point where you're neutered, but knowing your surroundings so that you can adapt to it. And when you adapt in a cautious manner. So just in case a hazard is afoot, you'll be able to respond in a way that keeps you safe. That's how I see it. Because if you're crossing a river in the wintertime, there's a pretty good chance that river could crack and you'll fall through the ice. So that's kind of direct, but it says a lot though on how you apply it. Okay, it says see this one. Although he travels all day, the sage never loses sight of his luggage carts. Although he travels all day, the sage never loses sight of his luggage carts. Now, luggage carts, even if you're actually walking around carrying luggage, we all carry luggage up here. Everything that we've experienced in our lives, we all have a past, no matter how big, no matter how small. No matter where you go, your luggage, your baggage will be with you. But there was one thing that it's I don't even know if this is a quote, but this is what I started saying. Being frustrated is okay, because where there's baggage, there's going to be frustration. But frustration, it's okay sometimes because there's a lot of discovery in frustration. You may have some baggage that stems from unresolved issues. You may have luggage or baggage that has hindered you or traumatized you to the point where you don't want to act at all. Or you may have taken on the baggage of another, and you believe that if you lose sight of their baggage, you kind of lose sight of them. So overall, what I take away from this one is that in life, there's going to be struggle. There's going to be baggage that you take with you, regardless of what happens to you. There's always something that you're going to hold on to that didn't necessarily sit with you in a positive way. But it's always good to never lose sight on it and keep it with you, because that's how you learn. You see what I'm saying? And when I hear this quote, it makes me think about something at Star Wars. uh, Padme, I don't know how many Star Wars fans are out there, but she's a character in Star Wars. But Padme, she was played by Natalie Portman. Padme, she said something to Anakin that our teachers or our students or our elders, they point out our flaws more than we would like them to. But it's good that they do it, because that's the only way we grow. You see, and it can be referred to baggage. We all have baggage in some form or fashion. Some of us have baggage that's a little bit more traumatic than others. Some of us has baggage that's a little bit more dramatic than others. Some of us have baggage that's a little bit more sensationalized than others. Some of us have baggage that's a little bit more complex than others. Some of us have baggage that's a little bit heavier than others. But regardless of what kind of baggage you have, there's always a way to dissect that baggage and take something positive away from it. Because like I said, like the philosophy says, where there's a negative, there's going to be a positive somewhere. So so sometimes it's good to open that baggage up and see what positive you can take away from it. A lot of people say experience is the best teacher. So yeah, you may have a lot of baggage, but you have experience as well. So as long as you learn from that baggage, that luggage, and you can pass on, excuse me, and you can pass on to another to hopefully cushion them in a way to they don't let their baggage hinder them in a way to the point where they don't act. So yeah, that's what I take away from it. Although he travels all day, the sage never loses sight of his luggage carts. Yeah, I just referred to baggage that we all carry that we all carry along with us all the time. And no matter how much baggage you have, you can always see some positive in it and take away, because there's no way that we're always going to have a cart full of luggage full of nothing but negative baggage. There's going to be some positive in there. So yeah, that's what I take away from it. All right, one more. Let's see. The sage is sharp, but does not cut. Pointed, but does not pierce. Forthright, but does not offend. Bright, but does not dazzle. All right, let's see if we can break this down in a quiz bleak fashion. The sage is sharp, but does not cut. You can have a sharp mind or a sharp intellect, or just have a sharp wit about yourself, but it doesn't mean that you have to look down on other people. It doesn't mean that you have to talk like this. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. You don't have to talk down to people. You don't have to put yourself on a pedestal and put yourself above people. You don't have to talk at people. That's what I take away from that. You can be as sharp as you want to be, and it's a good personality trait to have, or just have a sharp intellect. But you can still be humble. You can still be you can still you can still keep your humility intact. That's what I take away from it. The stage is sharp, but it doesn't cut. Pointed, but does not pierce. In the act of teaching, if you are a teacher or a master and you recruit a lot of knowledge and wisdom, when you're passing on what you've learned to another, try not to focus too much on what they get wrong, but what they get right. And like I said, this is the martial artist in me. I refer this to when you are a teacher, you're teaching a particular technique or stance, or obviously the students are gonna get a lot wrong. But as a teacher, you don't. That's not what you want to focus on. You want to focus on what they get right, because you want them. You want to keep them. You want them to keep them to keep. You want them to come back. You want them to continue to keep seeing you. So you don't want to discourage, your student or your disciple or what have you, to the point where they feel like they're not making any progress whatsoever. There's a way to do it. So again, that's the power of that positive, the power of positivity. Just that constant encouragement from one person to another. That's what I take away from it. So you could point, but don't pierce. You can bestow what you learn to another, but don't focus too much on what they don't get, but focus on what they do get, and you grow from there. That's the ultimate way of being a guide in a way. Forthright, but does not offend. There's going to be people in the world that you are more intellectual than. There's going to be people in the world that who may not have as much wisdom as you, who intellect, they may not match your intellect as well, if you will. So, again, it goes back to what I was saying. You don't have to talk down to people. Just because you possess a higher intellect, there is a way to inspire people. There is a way to congregate people by merely being a guide for them, as opposed to just, I guess you say, dictatorial and stuff like that. So I want you to do kind of as I say, but I'm not gonna force it on you. In a way, like I said, this is kind of like, it's a combination of being a teacher, student, or a combination of being an individual operating in chaos. So forthright, but does not offend. Or this could refer to you're challenging in a civil way somebody else's philosophy or somebody else's belief. It's kind of like, it refers to me like how Charlie Kirk used to do. He had his own set of beliefs, and then he would welcome people to debate and challenge. So, but he always did it in a very civil manner. He didn't really. Like I said, if you got offended, that's only because you probably just didn't agree with them. A lot of people get offended when somebody who just disagrees with them about stuff. But Charlie, he very much let the opposition take the floor and express their their viewpoint on things and stuff like that. And you can do it in a way where you don't talk down to people, where you don't offend people, where you don't ridicule or judge people and stuff like that. So that's how I take it. You could be forthright with what you believe and what you've learned, but when you present it to another, there's a way that you can do it where they don't feel too bad about themselves. They don't feel like what they learned and what they accrued over the years, it's wrong or bad. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I take away from that. Bright, but does not dazzle. Well, that speaks volumes to me, definitely. How you carry yourself? There's a lot of people. Like I live in New York City, so and there's a lot of people who dazzle around here. So just because it doesn't look like, it shines, doesn't mean it's not shining. You don't have to let people know that you carry this amount of confidence. You basically don't have to show your nonchalance. You don't have to show it, because like I said, it's all up here anyway. But you don't have to wear it. If that makes any sense. That's what I take away from it. Bright, but it's not dazzle. You can present yourself in a modest fashion, but pretty much letting your words, your viewpoint on life, your philosophy, let that be the light. Let that shine. You don't necessarily have to wear that shine. You don't necessarily have to be loud about how you present yourself. But like the brain, I guess, is the loudest thing. That's how I take it. It's just kind of let your knowledge and your wisdom kind of speak for itself. You don't have to wear it. That's maybe I'm getting a little too over. Maybe I'm digging deep too much into that one. But you got people who, they may not look like much, they may not dress like much, but when you get to know them as people, they're probably some of the brightest lights, the brightest stars, the most insightful people you will ever meet in your life. And I've definitely met people like that. They didn't. They weren't always wearing like the designer clothes, and they looked like they wore hand-me-downs and the sneakers. Well, they didn't look like much, but they had a lot of this. That's what I take from it. You know, something like the illusion of, oh, this is something that's shining, or this is something that's loud. Because human beings were very visual, we like to believe that the person who is shining, or the loudest person, is going to be a person that's a lot to take away from. But then we soon realize that it's the people who are kind of like the exact opposite, who have a lot to say. Even though you don't hear them all the time, but they do have a lot to say once you get to learn, once you get to know them. That's how I see that. But yeah, man, we over an hour on this one, man. But like I said, this is what this type of stuff does to me, man. I mean, it just exercising your brain, and wow, man. I mean, this is just Taoism. So just by itself, and I haven't even cracked the surface. But I just wanted to dig deep into this and just kind of like just do these little brain teasers and stuff like that, go through these quotes and stuff like that, and just have fun with this stuff, man. Like I said, if you're not too familiar with Taoism, and if you're open to other philosophies and different viewpoints of life and stuff like that, man, have at it, man. Because I'm all about that, man. I like learning. I'm very cultural. I like to learn about different cultures and rituals and traditions, no matter where it comes from. No matter where it comes from, man. So exercising that brain, working that muscle, so you don't have, like I said, you don't have to, Working this can get you far, but this can get you further. So, in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not saying that you can always use this. I mean, this is necessary sometimes too, but to have this to match it, it's a great combination. So, in a lot of cases, the pen can be mightier than the sword, if you will. But all right, everybody, 31 cents added. Another one for the archives. It's your brother Bleak signing out. Until next time, you guys. Us.